This episode of Robservations is brought to you by the first annual Intergalactic Imagination Connoisseurs Film Festival. We're accepting entries until December 1st, 2020. What's stopping you from making your film? We're waiting. Well, greetings, Imagination Connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your dupe of dope... Dupe? Am I your dupe of dope discourse? I hope not. Your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of science fiction and cinema. That's right. Your Archbishop of Banterbury, your Chancellor of Cheerfulness, your Pharaoh of Physical Media, and, of course, your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, robcasting at you, Imagination Connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. Because this is Robservations, I'm not just going to talk about today's topic, which dropped a couple hours ago. I also have a long, well, it's not really a rant, but I want to talk about world building and verisimilitude and how some franchises do a very good job of it and other franchises don't. Using an interesting article I found. All you have to do is, punch in world building into Google and see what shows up. I think all writing staffs of all television shows should do just what I did, especially if you're writing science fiction. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, that's where I'm at today. So welcome. Good to be here for Robservations episode number 542. 542. You know, in the last 24 hours, I have read, believe it or not, 3 screenplays, which is interesting. Now, I can't tell you what they are. I mean, I could tell you what they are, but I can't tell you what they are. But it was interesting. I haven't read 3. 2 of them I got from one source, and one I got from another. And I actually did some notes. I've been thinking about this one because apparently I might get made. And it's one of those stories I keep thinking about. I think the script isn't there yet, but I keep thinking about the story, which I guess is a good thing because I keep thinking about ways like, well, what if this were to happen? And what if this were to happen? But there's a lot of ghoulish fun in this one particular script. And we'll see what happens. But it's nice to get back into reading scripts. That doesn't mean I want to become a reader again. I don't want to write coverage. I don't want to do any of that. Please no. Anyway, so for those of you who have not been paying attention to social media today, and why should you pay attention to social media every day? You shouldn't, but I do. And this story dropped that I found pretty interesting. It's now been reported everywhere. Let me put my glasses on here. I got it from the iDownload blog. They were reporting on it too. So let me call it up here, the iDownload blog. So, here is the story. New speculation has Apple seeking to acquire the rights to the James Bond flick No Time to Die. Christian Zbrig on October 23rd published this. Apple TV may be looking to acquire the rights to the upcoming James Bond flick No Time to Die, the 25th film of the James Bond series and one of the Hollywood tentpoles. That's according to a well-connected film critic and screenwriter, Drew McWeeny. Drew, also known as Moriarty from the old Ain't It Cool News days. Obviously, I work with Drew on the Schmodown. He was one of my, when I was managing my team, the Burning Droogs. Actually, he wasn't on the Burning Droogs. He was on a different team. But I was managing them, and we were the family. And I really like Drew. I've been reading him for, 15, 20 years. I really like his film criticism a lot. I really liked his columns he was writing, showing movies to his kids, Film Nerd 2.0. He's a good man, and I've always enjoyed what he has to show us. That's according to a well-connected film critic and screenwriter, Drew McWeeny, who speculated on Twitter that we may well see James Bond debut on Apple TV or Netflix. Here is his quote and his tweet. I can't get my head around the idea that we may well see James Bond debut on Apple TV or Netflix. The numbers I've been hearing the last few days are insane. That would probably be referring to the purchase price, what Netflix or Apple TV would spend to acquire the film. He didn't pull this out of thin air. Tatiana Siegel and Boris Kitt in The Hollywood Reporter in September 2017 claimed Apple and Amazon had joined the race for the Bond film rights. But the emergence of Apple, which is considered such a viable competitor that Warner's is now pressing MGM hard to close a deal, and Amazon shows that the digital giants consider Bond one of the last great untapped brands, like a Marvel, Pixar, or Lucasfilm, that could act as a game changer in the content space. Apple's and Amazon's inclusion of the chase would indicate that more is on the table than film rights, including the future of the franchise if MGM will sell or license out for the right price. We haven't since heard much in that regard, but wouldn't you like to see the full Bond collection on Apple TV? Apple has been increasingly buying more blockbuster films for its video service, buoyed by the initial success of Tom Hanks' Greyhound and Agent 007. Whether you like the series or not, is one of the last untapped great film brands, and as such would make a great fit for Apple TV, advancing the company's position in the streaming wars significantly. The James Bond official Twitter feed said MGM, Universal, and Bond producers Michael G. Wilson and Barbara Broccoli today announced the release of No Time to Die. The 25th film in the Bond series will be delayed until the 2nd of April 2021 in order to be seen by a worldwide theatrical audience. The entertainment industry is rife with hushed whispers that the new long-delayed James Bond film No Time to Die is being wooed by streaming platforms for insane amounts of money. Top streamers with deep pockets have proposed to buy the much-awaited movie and are offering monstrous sums of money to host the film on their respective platforms. Netflix and Apple TV are two streaming platforms that are said to be at the forefront of offers. Both have truckloads of moolah to spend, and both would give an arm and a leg to grab the highly anticipated film if it means getting ahead in the streaming wars. Word is also out that MGM, the film studio that owns the Bond franchise, is under tremendous pressure to sell the film to the highest bidder, given that the theatrical scenario is not likely to normalize completely anytime soon. MGM, Universal, and Bond producers earlier this month confirmed that the movie will be delayed until April 2nd of next year, so that it could be seen by a worldwide theatrical audience. But if the current situation with the coronavirus pandemic doesn't get any better by next spring, they may be forced to premiere the eagerly anticipated new Bond installment on one of the deep-pocketed streaming services. So that's what they said. I'm a lifelong James Bond fan, so I gravitated toward this. I found this idea very interesting, and let me tell you what I think about it. You know, a lot of people have always been amazed at my prognostications about the entertainment business, so I'm going to give you one right now. I'm going to go out on a limb. And you know what? I'm not afraid of being wrong. If I'm wrong, everybody can say, I told you so, Rob. I was right about Quibi. I think that indeed the James Bond franchise is going to be purchased. I have long said that Michael Wilson and Barbara Broccoli, the Broccoli family has made Bond their family business since the release of Dr. No in 1962. This is the 25th official Bond film. Michael Wilson's in his late 70s. Barbara Broccoli's younger than him, but I believe they're stepbrother and sister. They've made 25 Bond movies. They're ending, people love Daniel Craig. They're ending on a high note. Apparently, Cary Fukunaga knocked this movie out of the park, by all reports. This is how you go out. You go out on a win. You go out, I think, go big or go home. There's no reason for them to start up with another actor? This is the perfect time to unload the Bond franchise. So there is, I think, motivation by the owners of the franchise. 2, MGM could use an infusion of cash. Now hear me out about the scenario here. When a movie like No Time to Die, we know that they've paid off the film. The $250 million reported production budget, they paid that off. Now, they spent a lot of money on marketing on this movie already. Let's just assume they talked about how Spectre, they spent $200 million marketing Spectre. Since it's been done in fits and starts, let's just say for the sake of argument that they've spent between let's call it $150 million in marketing that's been squandered twice. But let's call it that. So let's just say 150 million. So this movie now has $400 million against it. All right? 400 million bucks. So as we know, on a $250 million spend, they're expecting to make $1 billion. That's what they want. But remember, if the movie grosses $1 billion, the take home, that's a gross. That's not the net. Theater chains take half that. So if you think about it, like let's say they only spent $250 million, that doesn't even include marketing. If you look at the economics and you run the economics down, and look, I am by no means an economist, nor do I know what kind of money we're talking about here. But I think if a streaming service, and hear me out, if they can organize a deal, I think the right number to buy, again, totally speculating, I think the right number is $1 billion. And for that $1 billion, you get No Time to Die, and you get the Bond library of films. Kit and caboodle. All the rights. And I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they'll get $1 billion. I don't think it'll go up to $2 billion. I think it could be perhaps one of the biggest deals in history. You get the 25 Bond films. You get the world premiere of No Time to Die. But more importantly than anything else, you get the right to now exploit the Bond franchise however you want. If they want to make a TV series about Lashana Lynch's 00 agent, if she's spun out of the movie, they've always talked about that. They were going to make a Jinx movie. That didn't happen. They have the entire Bond universe. You could do a Blofeld series. You could do The Rise of Spectre. It's not just the 25 Bond films. It's not just the premiere of No Time to Die. It's the entire James Bond universe. And hey, you've got 25 movies. You've got Ian Fleming's books. You've got the spin-offs. You've got all the John Gardner novels that have never been adapted. I mean, you could do Bond limited series. The possibilities of owning the Bond franchise are endless. And I think for a streaming service like Apple or a Netflix to spend, Apple especially, $1 billion, everyone's going to at least sign up for Apple for at least a month. And they own the entire, you get a ready-made franchise with movies all the way back to 1962. I think this is going to happen. I think that it's going to go down, and it's going to be one of the biggest sales, if not the biggest franchise movie, I don't know what you'd even call it, in history. I think it's going to happen. If you ever saw Robert Altman's adaptation of Michael Tolkien's novel, The Player, and you should because it's a great movie about Hollywood, they talk about rumors. And Fred Ward's studio security chief says, the rumors, they're always true. And I think this kind of thing, who needs the aggravation? We still don't know if there's going to be theaters open. Now, what's different? People would say, well, Rob, what about Wonder Woman? See, all these other tentpole properties were produced by the entities that own them, like Disney and Marvel Studios. They produce Black Widow themselves. In the case of the ownership, it's just a distribution deal. That Bond is not really owned necessarily by anybody other than the Broccoli family and their holding company, Eon Productions. So whoever acquires the Bond franchise, it's going to be a pretty damn good deal for them. And if you amortize out those costs, if you look, you own all 25 Bond films, you start putting those on everybody watches James Bond movies. TNT has a Bond franchise or a Bond marathon. People watch them. So it makes sense. And a company like Apple, hey, we're releasing the iPhone 12, $1 billion. Maybe it'll be $1.5 billion. Maybe it'll even go as high as $2 billion, which would seem insane. But I think it is a distinct possibility. And it would not surprise me at all if it happens. As a matter of fact, I think it will happen. And again, I haven't talked to anybody. I would just from a business standpoint, if you're a streaming service, I don't think there's a bigger splash you can make than acquiring the entirety of the James Bond franchise. And if you had your Kevin Feige, if you had somebody that really understood the franchise and what it could mean, it could be endless. Like I said, a whole Spectre series, a series that shows how Spectre rises up and becomes the global criminal network that it is. That's a show, man. You know, that is a show. You Blofeld's early beginnings all the way to rising up the ranks. I mean, that's a multi-season show, like a Jack Ryan show. And what's so great about that is it can be a period piece. It could start in the 60s. You see the early days of Spectre rising up, the end of the Cold War and filling a power vacuum. I mean, it can be amazing. Then you have, you've got Tales of the Double O's. You could do a show about the rest of MI6's 00 agents. How interesting would that be? I mean, you could do an anthology show or you could do an ongoing show. And you could just call the show Licenses to Kill, License to Kill, whatever. I mean, you've already got it there. And there's too many delicious possibilities that anybody could spitball in a room, which makes you quickly realize why the Bond franchise would be so, lucrative, so attractive to any of these franchises. And Netflix, I mean, can you imagine? Hopefully they wouldn't give it to Bad Robot, but can you imagine if you had some, like a Noah Hawley, he can't do a Star Trek movie, but what if he came on board? Everybody loves the Bond franchise. Maybe if Netflix had it, Quentin Tarantino would come on and do his Bond film finally. You could do all kinds of possibilities. It wouldn't matter then if you went and did a period Bond in the 60s. You could go readapt Moonraker and adapt the actual novel. As a matter of fact, there's a show, you go back and you readapt Fleming's entire Bond oeuvre, including stories like Portrait of a Lady and Quantum of Solace. You could do all of that. You readapt Fleming's novels all as period pieces in the 60s. Do the whole pantheon. Just do them over again. You remake them again. I mean, there's so many things you could do with the Bond franchise. And spending let's up the ante. I like the number, $2 billion. Let's not make it $1 billion. You know what's cool? $2 billion. That's what's cool, Justin Timberlake. And I think that that could actually occur. And I don't think that people would just, if Apple TV were to buy, the problem with Apple is they just don't have that much on. But if it's the home of James Bond, Apple Plus, the home of James Bond. I mean, that's an endlessly valuable marketing tool. And if they're going to announce a number of Bond spinoffs, they could certainly pay for them and provide them with the lush production values that they need. I keep thinking about this idea, and I like it more and more. And I think it's going to happen. I don't even know if it's really on the chopping block. This could be some we got this covered rumor, but a lot of people are reporting it. Drew McReaney has some deep ties into the industry. You could have heard this. And the amount of numbers, when he says they're insane, maybe it would go as high as $2 billion, because I think $2 billion for 25 Bond films, including No Time to Die, that has yet to premiere. I mean, I can't think of anything more lucrative to spend your money on. Netflix is talking about spending $200 million on the new Russo brothers movie. $200 million. Well, I mean, look, if you spend $2 billion, I mean, what is that? That's 10 $200 million movies, and you're getting 25 Bond films, including No Time to Die, and the full-on film rights to do whatever you want. I mean, it's Apple Plus is the James Bond network. I think it's going to happen. I don't know why. I have no inside industry information at all. I haven't talked to anybody about this. I just read this article, but to me, it's one of those things you read and you're like, that makes sense. I think that makes sense. Now, I don't know if the Broccoli's do want to sell the Bond franchise. I've been saying this for a couple of years now. I think now's the time they should. I mean, why otherwise it'll just be, I mean, who wants, these movies are so difficult to produce. It's been, 5 years since Spectre came out. And normally it was 2 years between films, but now you've got to go find another Bond. And who wants to do that? But if it was on a streaming service, I mean, if Lashana Lynch, look, I think Lashana Lynch in that tactical gear with those big guns, she looks hot. I would watch, I haven't even met her character yet, but just what I've seen in the trailer, I would watch a 00 series starring Lashana Lynch, especially in this day and age. I mean, come on. You know, you can get the director of, the Charlize Theron movie. Why am I drawing? Why do I always forget the Old Guard, which is basically a Bond movie? I mean, get that director and go announce your show. Go do a limited series. I mean, I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen. I really do. Now, a lot of people might think that, oh, Rob, you's crazy. But am I crazy? I don't think I am. And I honestly, I believe that this is something, this could actually happen. What do you guys think? I don't know. I'll be very curious to hear what you think of this. Maybe you think I'm freaking insane. Like, dude, I think you've gone a little far this time. But one never knows. Okay, so this next thing I want to talk about, verisimilitude. As the viceroy of verisimilitude, it's the most important thing to me when you're watching science fiction, fantasy, and horror, more so than any other genre or any other kind of storytelling. In fantasy, science fiction, and horror, you have to have verisimilitude. You have to create a believable, fictitious world where all of this stuff's going to take place, so your audience goes with you on the journey. And I find that to be the most important thing. And when you think about your favorite universe or your favorite shared universe, Star Wars, peak verisimilitude when it came out. You know, shows like Firefly had verisimilitude. Up until things like, when I saw Serenity, I'm like, okay, so you've got the Reavers, I've said this before too, who's repairing their ships? You know, they're this marauding band of murderous brigands, but does a Reaver calm down long enough to like fix the engine of a ship that goes bad? I always thought that was a little weird. It really bothered me when I saw Serenity. Now, of course, all of this is brought up because of the second episode, or part 2 of the 3rd season Discovery opener. And there's a lot of things that happened in the Discovery opener, or the second episode, that I just was calling like, timeout. And it's one of my biggest problems with the show is the show has no verisimilitude. It keeps doing things that I don't believe. People are like, oh, come on, Rob, it's a science fiction show. I'm like, no, part of my enjoyment of science fiction, fantasy, and horror is when you can believe what's going on. We've talked about this a lot on the show. And all great, another Burnett corollary, or axiom, whatever you want to call it. All great science fiction, fantasy, and horror films also have great world building. They all do. They all establish their realities, and they pay those realities off. And they exist in these realities. Last night, I'll tell you what I don't believe. I don't believe that a capital ship, like, say, the Starship Discovery, can fly through a meteor, or an asteroid field, the debris field of a planet, and then literally crash land on the ground and be spacefaring in the same day. I don't believe that. I just don't believe it. And it's not a fighter, even though I don't believe a fighter. The Millennium Falcon, I mean, there are these interesting things that repeat. Like, the Millennium Falcon did the same thing in Rise of Skywalker. It literally crashed on the ground, and they'll say, wow, Rob, it's ice and snow. Yeah, I'm a skier. Ice is not that forgiving. I mean, it can be as hard as concrete depending on how cold it is. And, when a ship crashes in the ice, how about that deflector dish in the front? I mean, the entire front end of that ship, no matter what your shields are, were they up? I don't think so. Would be shredded. And yet, hey, the Discovery crashes on a planet and it's spacefaring the same day, pretty much. I just don't buy any of that. And most of Star Trek Discovery makes no sense to me. The things that they have in it make no sense. You know, they do all this stuff like I talked about. The burn happens, but all the Federation member worlds, they don't talk to each other through subspace. And that's just one of many things. Why do people have these guns that you shock people or you shoot them for a very long period of time? So I get in this argument on Twitter with people, and people are like, hey, Rob, well, Star Trek has never had that kind of verisimilitude. There's always, like, what about Q? Do you believe in Q? And I was thinking, well, okay, I'll tell you why I do believe in Q. Because all of Western civilization comes from a Judeo-Christian tradition. And the Judeo-Christian tradition assumes, we take it for granted, we take it on faith, that there is the supreme being, the creator of all things, God. Well, once you believe in God, well, then you can believe in the anthropomorphization of God. I mean, Jesus came to Earth, right? So in long-held Star Trek tradition, starting with people like Trelane, the idea that you have these omnipotent humanoids that come from dimensions beyond our own that have godlike powers, I believe that. I believed it when I was a little kid reading the Bible, reading the Old Testament and the New Testament. So it's not hard for me to make that leap that creatures, I mean, what did Arthur C. Clarke say? Significantly advanced technology would appear as magic to people that didn't understand the technology. I don't know the exact quote, I'm paraphrasing. But, supreme intelligences with incredible command over the natural world, like, say, a Q seems omnipotent. Maybe he is omnipotent, but I can believe him for that reason. Now, the whole thing about, like, Star Trek, I already know how big a capital ship is. I've seen them pounded. I've seen the Enterprise D crash on a planet. Admittedly, it wasn't ice. It was a forest, but still, we've seen these large starships take a pounding. And in modern Star Trek, whether it was the Franklin in Star Trek Beyond, it's sitting on the precipice of a mountain. Why don't we get out and push, and it'll be like a hang glider, and we'll be able to catch the air. They actually did that in Star Trek Beyond, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? Well, when a capital ship crashes on a planet, I don't care what happens. That ship is out of commission. I don't believe they could fix it and then get it aloft. I mean, if I had made that, if I had created that episode or I'd written that episode, I would have said, okay, we come out of this hyperspace conduit, this quantum tube, whatever, the boom tube. We come out of it into the middle of an asteroid field. The ship is hit by an asteroid because half of us are knocked out cold. And that makes sense. And it careens, it goes spinning and severely damaged, drifting in space. That I buy. But they have to get these characters onto a planet, so they literally crash the ship. And when you do that, I'm like, I'm out. I can't buy into that. I can't buy into that. And it's problematic for me. Just like I need rules. Horror films, science fiction films, and fantasy films, in order to keep the viewer's interest, you have to be world building all the time, and you have to give us the rules of the game. And play by those rules, because it's those rules that get people to, like, come on in and buy into your franchise. So I found this article on jerryjenkins.com's website. I guess it's his blog. Let's take a look at this article. And I really like this article. The Writer's Guide to World Building, How to Create Captivating Settings. Okay. A book like Game of Thrones, a movie like Star Wars, or even a video game like Final Fantasy can make it appear their creators have effortlessly built a fantasy world out of nothing. In fact, these worlds may feel as real as the world you live in. How do they do it? More importantly, can you do it? Or more importantly, can the fucking writers of modern Star Trek ever be able to do it? Because since 2009, not so much. More than 2/3 of my nearly 200 books are novels, but creating fictional worlds never seems to get easier. It's an art, and in genres such as fantasy or science fiction, world building is more important than ever and can make or break your story. In this world building guide, I'll give you tips to follow and errors to avoid. World building can be as complex as designing a unique venue with exotic creatures, rich political histories, and even new religions. Or it can be as simple as tweaking the history of the world we live in. See, I think that all believability for world building comes from our real world. You only have to look at our real world. I mean, also somebody on Twitter asked me, well, do you believe in dilithium crystals? Well, here's the thing. We burn matter, we burn wood and coal and things like that for fuel. We have plutonium. We have things that create nuclear reactions. So the idea behind dilithium crystals, that there are crystals that can be mined, that have certain properties that allow a matter and antimatter reaction of some kind, we don't really know. I mean, the actual ins and outs of how that works. But I believe it can work because there's something analogous here on Earth. You burn wood for a fire. So there's already something I can extrapolate and be like, oh, we take something out of the ground, or whether you cut a tree down or whether you get coal and burn those things to make a locomotive go or something. So I believe in dilithium. The concept behind dilithium is not something where I go, I don't believe in that. Now, in Star Trek 09, the funny thing about Star Trek is they've already set all this up. The world building is done. So what I find so strange to me is since Star Trek 2009, they keep subverting their world building, their technology especially. Star Trek Into Darkness, we see Khan Noonien Singh beaming from the cockpit of his one-man ship all the way across the galaxy to the Klingon homeworld? Well, first of all, that's a dangerous beam. And we also know that the only people that have transporters even remotely capable of that are the people that sent Gary 7 to Earth at the end of the the second season of Next Generation in Assignment Earth. Star Trek has done your world building for you, and yet modern Star Trek continually violates that, and it's frustrating. In this world building guide, I'll give you tips to follow and errors to avoid. World building can be as complex as designing a unique venue with exotic creatures, rich political histories, and even new religions, or it can be as simple as tweaking the history of the world we live in. Go as big as you want to, but remember, world building is serious business. You want to create a world in which your readers can lose themselves. Do this well, and they become not just fans, but also fanatics, like those who obsess over Star Wars, Star Trek, Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, the Marvel Universe, and Halo. Each approaches world building in a different way. Well, here's the thing. All of your world building can be extrapolated upon from our world today, our real world. That's where it should come from. That's where this world building emanates from. So our understanding of what is real and what isn't real is from our everyday lives. So what would be interesting to think is like, okay, if you were to go 1,000 years or 900 and some odd years into the future, what would that be like? What would that be like? Well, we can go look, where were we 1,000 years ago? So if you were to extrapolate where human beings were 1,000 years ago in our own history to where we are today, think about the advances in everything from medicine to technology to even our life expectancy. People live to be half what they live to be now. So what you do is then you take that, and if you're building a fictional Star Trek universe 1,000 years in the future, then you have like 100 different things to look at and go, well, if this was true 1,000 years ago for humanity, and now we're here, well, let's apply that to the Star Trek universe and run that down. Well, unfortunately, what we're seeing in Discovery is basically an amalgamation of direct-to-video post-apocalyptic Road Warrior ripoffs and other things from other movies. So we saw a saloon door, and it's very odd to me that that's their vision of the future, that nobody sat down and extrapolated about, okay, we now have Borg technology in the Star Trek universe. We know that we have Borg technology in the future. And since you're jumping ahead of time, what would that look like? I mean, once we're dealing in the time of Star Trek Picard, wouldn't people start using Borg technology without the nanites that infect your bloodstream to replace limbs or do other things? So if we've finally reached that transhuman era, when you go before the Big Burn, it's still 800 years. That's as long as Yoda was teaching Jedi for. So you have to ask yourself, there's a million different questions, and all those questions are potential story points. So anyway, each approaches world building in a different way. The real world. Here you set your story in a world we live in, but your plot is either based on a real event as an outlander or one in which historical events occurred differently. For instance, had Germany won World War II? Well, if Germany had won World War II, then you have a lot of assumptions. If Germany won World War II, then A, B, C, and D are equal, are also true. And if A, B, C, and D are true, and you extrapolate what America might look like if the Nazis won World War II, like, we didn't go into Germany and take it over and turn it into an American colony. I mean, Germany was still allowed to be Germany after World War II. But if Germany occupied, like in The Man in the High Castle, half the United States and Japan occupied the other half, it would be a very different thing. But if that were to happen, then you're like, okay, knowing the way and the Nazi regime and its tactics, what would happen? We can look at other conquered countries. Poland, Czechoslovakia, whatever, all the different countries Germany went into and how they treated the population, what happened when Germany invaded France. Now, you've got all of that to extrapolate from and create something new, but it comes out of our understanding of the real world, and that's the beginning and end of your world building. And Philip K. Dick's The Man in the High Castle imagines a world in which Franklin Roosevelt was assassinated in the early 1930s. 2, second world fantasy. Here you create new lands, species, and government, and you also invent a world rich in its own history, geography, and purpose. Example includes Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, or Discworld. Some novels combine the real world and the second world fantasy. The Harry Potter series, for instance, is set in the world we live in, but with rules and history foreign to us. The Chronicles of Narnia and Alice in Wonderland are also examples of this. Your job is to take readers on a journey that leaves them satisfied. And then he goes on and does this world-building guide. Now, he talks, this is very interesting. He says that outliners prefer to map out everything before they start writing, and pantsers, those who write by the seat of their pants, write as a process of discovery. Largely a pantser, I can tell you that discovering a new world is a whole lot harder than building it before you get too deep into your writing. Now, I don't know how far along they did this in Star Trek Discovery, but if they sat down and have an entire plan for a beginning to the end of the season, they've never really done that and adhered to it. Maybe it'll be interesting, but what I've seen now has left me woefully unimpressed. It's just an amalgamation of different kinds of movies, and I think all the characters of the Discovery are acting, now that their savior, their Lord and Savior, Michael Burnham, is here, maybe things will get better, but they're all incompetent, and they're not good at their jobs. And it's frustrating to watch, but anyway. So do you build a world by the seat of your pants like they seem to be doing over at Star Trek, or do you outline it and plan it? I am firmly in the camp of outlining it and figuring it out beforehand, because once you figure out your world, your milieu, then you can go somewhere, and how many story ideas will germinate out of that. Build your world first, he says, and you can focus on your story. However, over-planning can also be a problem. Many fantasy writers tell me they become so engrossed in world building that they find reasons not to write. Well, you don't want to do that. World building must not come at the expense of your story. If you're mostly a pantser like I am, you may have to spend more time planning than you're used to. But if you're an outliner, draw a line in the sand and start writing as soon as you're ready, even if you suspect that you have more spade work to do as you go. Describe your world. Paint for your reader a world that transports them, allowing them to see, smell, hear, and touch their surroundings. George R. R. Martin does this for pages. He can describe fabric for 10 pages, the taste of food, whatever, but it makes it all real and palpable and great. Core aspects to consider: the climate and the environment. Everything from the weather to the fundamental building blocks of your world. Is it like Earth or an alien planet? Resources: food, water, air, etc. A post-apocalyptic world, for instance, might lack fuel, money, or power. Geography: the landscape, important locations, landmarks. When James Cameron wrote the movie Avatar, he created countless references to books on Pandora's vegetation and climate and even botany. In Cormac McCarthy's The Road, the main characters live in a post-apocalyptic world covered in ash and largely devoid of life. Their entire journey revolves around finding food and water and how to stay warm. In Game of Thrones, George R. R. Martin went as far as creating maps for himself so he knew where everything was. Look at that. Other novels that feature maps: Lord of the Rings, Chronicles of Narnia, Discworld, and The Princess Bride. World-building questions. How much of your world do you need to show to support the story? How does the terrain influence your story? What is the weather like? How many mountains, oceans, deserts, forests are there? What are the borders? What are the natural resources, and how do they impact your story? And then you have to inhabit your world. Are the inhabitants people but somehow different from you and me? Are they aliens, monsters, or some other new species? When writing Lord of the Rings, Tolkien gave Frodo a past, certain personality traits, and unique morals. But first he had to demonstrate what a hobbit looked like and how he lived. When world building, don't worry yet about the individual. Establish the inhabitants as a species. World building character questions. How big is their population? How do they become part of your world? Do they have a class system? What are the genders, races, and species? How do they get along with one another? Are there alliances? What resources do they enjoy? What resources do they lack? Well, now, I'm not going to read this whole article. I'm going to put it in the live chat, but you guys get the idea. In order to come up with a compelling show that has people coming back, or a movie that's compelling, you have to be doing world building so people are interested in what you're doing, because they know the limitations, they know how the universe works, and that's what they want. And I feel that all great science fiction, fantasy, and horror must build a world, and must pay it off, and must explain it. And so when I see a capital ship like the Discovery crash onto a planet, and then they just need their communications array fixed, obviously, because it was destroyed, crunched, but I would say the whole front end of the Discovery would be a savage mess if that were to actually happen. But when it does happen and they don't cop to it, or there's no consequences, I can't go with it. There's no consequences ever on Discovery. At least not for our characters. But, so, yeah, did I put this? Let me put this in the chat. I don't think I did. I don't remember. So, let me post this again. There you go. And that's one of the things that I find so irksome about Star Trek Discovery is they were gifted an entire universe that has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours setting up and explaining the whole universe. And when they do things that I can't believe in, I'm like, clearly you haven't done your research, because I don't believe anything you're saying here, because it's not established the way it works in Star Trek. But who am I? I'm just a complainer. I'm an old man yelling at Simpsons clouds. What are you going to do? What do you guys think? How do you feel about this kind of thing? Oops, I didn't mean to do that. I see what happens. See the behind the scenes. It just things like that occur, and then up. There's a lot of letters. I got a lot of letters. Our friend Pedro Ferreira. One day, Pedro, I'm going to get that. Pedro says, hi, Rob. I wish to talk to you about something that I've touched on in the past about Star Trek that's been bugging me. Modern Star Trek, or the franchise under Alex Kurtzman, has become politically one-sided. Putting aside the problems with continuity and how the characters are written, one of the franchise's biggest issues by far is leaning toward far-left political ideology. I've spoken in the past and maintained Star Trek always used to be partisan, which is why people from both the left and right could enjoy it. The franchise has always had a left-wing and right-wing content or ideals. It's possible to have regressive ideologies and be left-wing. Star Trek can be progressive without being biased toward a political side. I'm not going to talk about how Star Trek has left-wing and right-wing content, as I've already explained how a previous letter you read out. However, as I've mentioned in the past, I go with centralism so I can see how society is shifted towards far-left politics. I do not like to be pulled politically to either side, and unsurprisingly, a lot of Star Trek fans see current Star Trek as the best Star Trek because it's now leaning towards being left-wing. Is that a good thing? How can you have the yin without the yang, especially when you're talking about storytelling? The writing never told you what to think politically, but since Discovery began identity politics, is what the show itself has become about for some reason. The franchise in its current state definitely feels corrupt. I agree. I think Star Trek is absolutely corrupt at the top, and the fact that, try this as an exercise. If you're going to watch Discovery Season 3, Episodes 1 and 2, count up how many people are killed in the episode. Just blown away and killed. Now, Also, I've always said that Star Trek doesn't have villains, it has antagonists. Well, so far, especially last night and the night before, or the previous show, all there are these cookie cutout, barely above a Western show antagonists that are quick to pull their guns and everybody's shooting each other. And it doesn't feel like Star Trek at all. At all. It's like, where'd the adults in the room go? And it's just incredibly frustrating. Why do I mention all this now? You may have heard that in your country there's a certain election coming up, and boy, have the casts of Star Trek been busy. Go anywhere near a social media site that mentions Star Trek, and you see people like Marina Sirtis urging Star Trek fans to go out and vote for Joe Biden. It goes without saying, or maybe it needs to be pointed out due to the lack of common sense, that if asking fans to vote for a political side is just wrong. Mr. Biden, perhaps Trump, has done something similar with Trek, although I haven't found any mention of it. Perhaps, let's see, a very clever Mr. Biden. Let's not forget Biden held a charity. I'm so lost. Hang on. Let's not forget Joe Biden recently held the charity fundraiser using Star Trek's name. Very clever, Mr. Biden. Perhaps Trump has done something similar with Trek, although I haven't found any mention of it on social media, so apologies. Regardless of whether you're a big fan of Donald Fake News Trump or Joe Biden, them Sirtis isn't alone, but she seems to be one of the main people along with George Takei as well as many others. Do they not understand that the future of humanity shown in the franchise has rejected politics? Leave future politics to the Cardassians, the Bajorans. Humans of the future are supposed to be more enlightened. Well, we did have our own diplomats, and there was John Gill, who decided, I need to jumpstart this culture. Why don't I use National Socialism as my model? Wrong guess, Hans. Would you care to go over Double Jeopardy where the scores can really change? I know I'll probably get in trouble with some listening to this, but I have to say people involved in promoting the franchise for their own political bias, well, there's no easy way to say this, deep breath, that they should be ashamed of themselves and their behavior. They can favor one individual politically over the other, but to urge fans to support their views in the name of a franchise feels corrupt. Using the fan base isn't done this way. The kind of thinking is dividing the fan base, creating an it's either us or them mentality, and they fall into the same traps that future is presented in Star Trek avoid. Let me tell you something interesting. The Twitter incident that occurred to me shortly after my bedroom ceiling decided to come down. On a side note, you could still walk around absolutely fine upstairs. It's just the thick ceiling plaster or whatever it's called that came down, exposing all of the wood. Anyway, on the back on the topic of Star Trek, I was on Star Trek Twitter and got annoyed with a far left fan, for using a generation's gift to describe their love of Kurtzman Trek. I have mentioned before how this annoys me, and I'm not gatekeeping as they think I am. As I predicted, I was ganged up on by the far left, or more importantly, far left-leaning fans at the convention, and it turned into a political discussion. One person went completely off topic, complaining, didn't support gay rights and Black Lives Matter, which came out of nowhere because I never even mentioned any of these things. But more worryingly, one individual fan criticized me for being too conservative, saying he supports rioting out in the street and causing harm to others if it gets the results he wants. Star Trek, in his eyes and ears, has taught him that change can only happen with violence. Casualties being a necessary evil if it leads to the greater good. I'm not. I'm not either. I'm not generally into blocking people on social media because I don't want to slowly get into a position where I start blocking people with slightly different views to me. That kind of power can become misused, and the more you use it, but had this guy not blocked me, I would have blocked him and reported him to Twitter. The guy was clearly deranged. If he doesn't mind causing harm to others, he's the kind of guy who'd randomly stab you if you walk past him on the street because he'd know you weren't on the same side politically. The political spectrum. My point in all of this is that when I think of what people like Marina Sirtis and Alex Kurtzman are doing with the Star Trek name, this is who they're making Star Trek for. These people are their audience today, and it doesn't take a genius to see that's not a good thing. Anyway, what I want to know, according to the people on Twitter, I'm supposed to be out of touch with Star Trek. Apologies, Rob, for getting a rather, what is that, Giro letter, but this is a letter I've needed to send you for a while. Let's not use our authority and fail to blame the fans. Yeesh, yeah, I know. It's pretty weird. Let's see. Let me jump over and see what people are saying over in the chat. I don't know. We shall see. Willow is here. Willow says, I've not seen Borat 2 yet, but you've probably heard the story about Rudy Giuliani. What's the legality of filming and releasing something like this? How has Sacha Baron Cohen not gotten sued out of existence after all the pranks he's pulled on politicians? I'm sure he's very careful about the words he uses. That's all I can figure. And once you do that, you're pretty golden. So Willow goes on to say, have you watched any of What is America? I did. I cannot believe the segment where Sacha Baron Cohen tricked a politician into over pretending to be a Chinese, pretending to be Chinese, shout the N-word, and run around with his bare buttocks out while screaming America is actually real. Yeah, I mean, I think that Borat works because he's playing against the real world. He says things that either we're all thinking or that are just too stupid. So, yeah, I have seen that. And the Sacha Baron Cohen stuff was gold. It was gold what he was able to do. And it just shows you, I mean, look, if you're a politician and somebody calls you up for this kind of thing, you're going to say probably yes. We would just know that who it is that you're talking to because, we already know these things. I cannot believe the segment where Sacha Baron Cohen tricked a politician into pretending to be Chinese, shout the N-word, and run around with his bare-knuckle buttocks while screaming America. It's pretty wild, pretty real. Yeah. But that's the genius of it. If you bring somebody in and you say, hey, would you mind I put some stuff on tape? I would like to film you. And someone says, okay. They agreed to it. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there are going to be a lot of Borat 2 lawsuits, probably. But I don't know the answer to that. Mark C. says, while anything is possible, I started running it through my head. Outside of Eon, MGM, and Universal, both has distribution rights. How does Apple distribute without breaking their contract? How does Eon make money and stay out of litigation? Well, that's a really good question, but I believe those movies there's only a distribution deal set up, and right now there's no way they can fulfill that that deal. So I would assume the way that the Broccoli's get out of these things now is that Universal is in breach. Unless they sign documents saying, well, we're agreeing to push this movie back for a year, when that's expensive, that's costly. But now, if they were offered $2 billion, that's a healthy profit. That's a healthy profit for that franchise. So why not do that? Calvin Bowles says, so why didn't they just keep the November release date if they were ever considering it? Sending Apple to blah, blah, blah. Hang on. Calvin says, so why didn't they just keep the mid-November release date if they were even considering sending it to Apple Plus? Then we could have all seen it in time to die on the street. Well, it doesn't really work that way. They've seen the performance of Tenet. They know what's going to happen, and they need to make that money back to pay for this very expensive Bond film. So that's not really an option, unfortunately. And they weren't going to get enough of an audience to see it. Look at what happened to Tenet. They expected $1 billion from that movie, and it just limped past $200 million. So what are you going to do? Richard K. sends in a super chat and says, hi, Rob. With you being a big Star Trek fan, what's your thoughts on Star Trek Deep Space Nine? My favorite is Voyager, but also DS9 is all awesome, and my friend said it's the worst of them. Your thoughts? I love Deep Space Nine. I love the whole Dominion War saga. I think one of the great strengths of Deep Space Nine is its secondary cast that they've developed, starting really with Louise Fletcher at the end of Season 1 and the beginning of Season 2, and meeting people like Jeffrey Combs as Weyoun and then later as Shran. I mean, there's in Enterprise, he's so good in Deep Space Nine. He's so good. I'm a huge fan. I'm just a huge fan of Deep Space Nine. I think it's a great, great show, and it's been fun. I've been rewatching it again, and it's great. I do love it. So yeah, don't listen to anybody who says Deep Space Nine's not good. Calvin Bowes, watch it for yourself. Says, will you let everyone know Braxton has a YouTube channel? It's called The Little Trekkie, spelled like I wrote it, Trekky. Well, everybody, go sign up for The Little Trekkie, Braxton's YouTube channel. Did you, Dad, have to fill out a lot of the forms or have to make sure that no other kids are targeted? I was wondering, how do YouTube kids do that nowadays? Bunyan Snipe is here, and he says, I cannot express how much I want a James Bond, Simon Templar, Modesty Blaze, Danger Man, Persuaders, Professionals, Protectors, shared universe. That'd be amazing. I'd be all for that. And look at how many, if you bought the Bond franchise, look at how many things you could now make or have access to. Bunyan Snipe says, I cannot express how much I want a James Bond, Simon Templar, Modesty Blaze, Danger Man, Persuaders, Professionals, Prosecutors, or shared universe. Me neither, Bunyan Snipe. Jeff Yerke is here, and he says, Hi, Rob. I absolutely support your Bond Apple theory. It makes sense. Apple TV is still mired in a luxury discretionary streaming service with more subscriber being older. And who watches Bond? Older folks. I grew up with it, and I love it. Live long and prosper, the Yerk Man. Well, thank you for that. Say hello to your wife for me. Tell her last night was great. I'm just kidding. Stubble, you were there too, you know. Stubble McShave sent in a tip and said, I could see a 005 or 006 TV series where they have the same actors as M, Q, and other characters. Absolutely. They could also create their own universe who introduced agents from all over the world. Imagine an agent from South America or China where Bond guest stars. I agree with that 100%. It leaves you open to do a million cool different things, and I think they're going to try them all and see which ones work and which ones do not. So that's a great idea. The Yerkman, hello, Mr. Yerkman, says, regarding world building, Ron Moore wrote a 49-page secret Bible in December of 2003 for his reimagining of Battlestar Galactica. And guess what? I bought that show right from the get-go. More even. Put the work in up front. P.S. Mrs. Yerke says hi. Well, you say hi right back to her. Emil Johansson, how are you, man? What are your feelings on Borat? I think he went a bit too far with that Holocaust survivor, but otherwise, I like Sacha. It's weird seeing him in serious roles. I like Sacha Baron Cohen a lot, and I can't wait to see this movie. I'm going to watch it tonight. I hope it's very subversive. But yeah, I think that, I like Borat. I like what he's trying to do. I like how he confronts us and makes us look at ourselves in the mirror. Mr. Tickle Trunk sent in a super chat and says, too bad all the dilithium is all gone in Star Trek Discovery. Imagine if Zephram Cochrane didn't have access to, oh, wait, he didn't. Confusion. Confusion intensifies. Well, what can I say to you? Michael Preston sends in a super chat and says, hey, Rob, the burn was from Babylon 5. The cannons look like theirs from Farscape. And Michael Burnham is the exact physical, is Private Benjamin, hoping a private run on the ship, a private run ship. I can't read today. First of all, kudos for bringing up Private Benjamin. You know the old Repo Man shrimp or plate of shrimp? Well, that whole thing, I'm telling you, just the other day, I was thinking about Private Benjamin. Judy Benjamin. Do these come in anything other than green? I love Private Benjamin. It's not on Blu-ray. That's so funny that you brought it up because I went and looked for it because I was going to get it. I want to see it again. Stubble McShave says, what do you think of the opinion that Mad Max Fury Road is essentially a highly stylized Roadrunner cartoon? It kind of is, but there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. Emma Bannon sends in a tip and says, hi, Rob, can you lend me $10? Sure. I can PayPal it right back to you. Thanks very much. Roberto Suarez is here. Roberto says, my ideal Bond spin-off project is a series of telefilms adapting the original Fleming novels and short stories directly and chronologically as period pieces, along the lines of Masterpiece Mystery, call it James Bond Master Spy. Look, I'm with you. Like I said, I would love to see them reattach or reattack the Fleming novels and start from scratch and do it all over again. I think that would be amazing. Because why not? Yeah. Well, guess what, boys and girls, kind souls, gentle beings from across the universe? This is a short show today, an hour-long show. I've got a lot of letters, which the show will be much longer tomorrow. Remember, tomorrow is what is it? It's our Halloween Zoom party. That's right. Tomorrow's our Halloween Zoom party. The only way you can get in is if you have a costume. Now, I have to check. I don't know yet if I can get Roberto Suarez to help us with this or if the Richard is handling it. Honestly, I don't know. I'm flying by the seat of my pants on this one, but I know it's going to start at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe even earlier, but it's going to start at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and you have to have a costume on. That's Pacific time. So that'll be tomorrow on the Burnettwork. Very exciting. For this short show, you have to know that we're doing Whining About Movies Saturday night after our Zoom party. We're going to be doing The Witch, which we're going to do. Everyone's just been slammed here. And then we're also doing The Fly on Sunday night. Those links have already been set up, so you can see them. And it should be a lot of fun. So should tomorrow. I'm going to jump off this quick one now because I have so much work to do. And I want to thank you for being here. I'm going to do a long show tomorrow where I got a ton of great letters. I can't wait to get to them. So it's pretty exciting. What do you guys think about Bond? Do you not think about Bond, or do you think about Bond? I'm curious to see what happens and what everyone thinks. I think it's going to happen. I don't know why. I have no information. I just think it's going to happen. And so I will leave you with that. I want to thank my moderating staff. I want to thank Greg Smith. I want to thank Mike Bodden. I want to thank the Richard. I want to thank, I don't know who else is here as I look through. Greg Smith is here. Bunyan Snipe is here. Joshua Levesque is here. Robert Pariso is here. Oh, potpourri of moderators. I want to thank you all for what you do. And tomorrow should be fun as well. So remember, Whining About Movies, The Witch tomorrow, and The Fly on Sunday. Cronenberg's The Fly, which should be a lot of fun. So anyway, I remind you, or I just want to say, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And before I sign off, I'd like to say something about the Imagination Connoisseur Film Festival. A lot of people have been sending me movies, but they're movies that have already been playing on either your YouTube channel or at a festival or something. I've received like 5 movies, which this is the case. And the whole point was these are supposed to be universal premieres. Now, I'm taking everyone's money. If you're paying me an entry fee and you send me your film, I'm going to play your movie. I just want you to know it cannot be in competition because that's not the rules. But I will put your money where my mouth is. I will take your entry fee, and I'm going to put your movies up anyway. But I hope people don't get mad. But one of the first rules of the film festival is it has to be a universal premiere. It can't be played anywhere else. It can't be on your Vimeo channel, even though it's password protected. And it's been frustrating because I get these new movies. I'm like, wow, this is going to be great, and then I realize I can't have it in competition, and I'm angry about that. I don't like it. But anyway, that's it. That's the end of Robservations 542. It's a quick show today. Want to know what you think about Bond? I really do. And with that, I say to everyone, have a better day. And tomorrow, Steve Frosty Skywalker, when I first met him, he had so much fun when he came out from the East Coast, and the next day he's a friend of my friend Scott Hyman, and he goes, last night we partied, but tonight we're going to rage. I never really knew what that meant. We all just laughed. But I kind of feel the way tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be a fun day. We'll do a show, then we'll do a Zoom party, and then we'll do another show. How about that? It's just a party. And I invite you all. Wear a costume and wear a mask. And with that, I say, have a better day.